All right, thank you. Welcome, everyone. This is way more people than I expected. All right, so let's start. We have 20 minutes, and then we'll have like 5 minutes for questions. So, all right, I'm going to talk about the state of enterprise Linux today. I'm the product manager for RHEL Server, so I think I have like enough permission to talk about that. First thing, I don't think we do this enough. Everything that I've created in here, I want it to be share alike. I think I've discovered a problem in the world where I didn't for a long time, like 10 years, 20 years, whatever. I have not done this intentionally, and I think it's important to do it intentionally, or else I'm a hypocrite if you look at like things like large language models right now and all the problems with that. All right, I will try to go a little slower. All right, so why would you care about this? Apparently more people care than I thought. Okay, a couple of reasons you might care about this. Maybe you deeply care about open source. Does anyone raise your hand if you deeply care about open source? Sweet. Raise your hand if you think there might be a conspiracy at Red Hat. A couple. I know that guy. How about like, how many of you think that? Ooh, how many of you think that commercial interests play a strong role in open source today? Good or bad, either way. Okay, yeah, exactly. Are any of you curious about what customers say to people like me when I go and talk to them? All right, interesting, all right. What about, how many of you do think that like open source is under threat? Like there are new threats to open source? Okay, so not as many as I would think, but I think there is. But, and how many of you have some optimism about this? All right, this is good. This is the right crowd, I think. I think we've matched up. So I think this is an example of why you should care. I had some guy beat me up online about this because I posted it. But the only thing I'm trying to show here, and by the way, Red Hat has historically contributed a lot to OpenSSL, although we don't as much as we used to because we had one of the main guys, et cetera, et cetera. There's a bunch of backstory. Long story short, though, 87% of non-trivial commits, not one-liners, are by 56 people that are all paid. So you see that there's definitely, like this is a very crisp example of like commercial interests definitely influence open source, and in fact, in this case, pretty much almost all of it is done by commercial interest. So all right, so that's enough of why you should care. I think you all care. I didn't mean to do this slide. I'm going to make some loose definitions quickly. Don't beat me up, don't kick me. How many of you are into SUSE really deeply and you love SUSE? I'm not going to talk about that. I don't think I have a lot of authority to talk about that. I think I'm the RHEL guy. I talk to a lot of Red Hat customers. I don't talk to a lot of SUSE customers unless they're leaving off and on. But to be honest with you, it's a pretty stable market comparatively. Like these don't happen that often. So long story short, I define enterprise Linux as like Fedora, CentOS, RHEL, Oracle, Rocky Alma, maybe some Amazon Linux mixed in there, et cetera, like the things that are kind of RPM-based and RHEL-based and kind of in that ecosystem. I call it a landscape because the word ecosystem has baggage at Red Hat. It means our partners that deliver software and hardware on it, on RHEL, with RHEL. Sorry, RHEL, I use the word RHEL to describe Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So RHEL, if you hear me say that, that's what that means. It's the way we say it. All right, so just, again, a tiny bit of background, because I have very little time. This is how I view products. Open source or not, I think. This is how Silicon Valley views it, too. I stole this from some investor slide. I changed it to like what my brain was thinking. I was like, wait a minute, this is what I do at work. But long story short, you know, every product and service in the world, I'm American, so I have to think of everything as capitalism. It's the only thing we know. So there's a cost to everything, and then you set a price, and then you hope that you split the profit with the person that's buying the stuff. So like you sell them a car, and they get to drive to work faster, and they save time, and they get to spend more time with their family, and there's a value to that, right? And the vendor sells them a car for 20,000 euros, or 40,000 euros nowadays because it's more expensive, and then they save, hopefully, 20,000 euros in time, you know, driving their family around, et cetera, et cetera. This is basic products. But then when you look at open source, it's a little twisted, just a hair, because some of the cost is the upstream development, And then some of the cost is productizing it and selling it and marketing it. There are other costs in there. But everybody kind of expects their profit. You know, the community wants free stuff. I do. I want to be able to use Linux on my laptop. I am using RHEL, but I like Fedora and Ubuntu and SUSE, and I've used every Linux distro out there. I was a long-time Gentoo user, to be honest. But long story short, you can kind of see community profit, vendor profit, buyer profit. There's a price up here. There's not really a price in this first category. But if you think of it this way, now you can start to think of like, all right, well, what market problems do these different groups of people solve and for what reasons? And I think it makes it crisper and easier to think through when things are right and wrong and et cetera, et cetera. All right, so I will get into the saucy part. So I gave a talk very deeply on this at Ohio Linux Fest a few months back, maybe, midsummer. I will not actually go super deep into this. I do want to say, like, this is kind of my view of the world. I ran it by a bunch of people at Red Hat. Nobody disagreed. I've ran it by a bunch of public people. Nobody's really beat me up too bad about this. But this is kind of the state of things today. You know, I had another drawing where I showed Alma down here, but they kind of went up there. And I think this is kind of still the state of it. I do want to show that, like, you know, RHEL Core OS we view as sort of downstream of RHEL, like it's a version of RHEL for OpenShift. And then we think of Red Hat Universal Base Image as like a subset of RHEL. And so you kind of can almost think of those as quasi-downstream. They're really kind of like the same stream, but like subsets of RHEL. I think that's probably the only like weird thing in here. Other than that, I think this is the state of it. All right, so I did want to celebrate a little bit. I did this in the summer too, but like there is actually some very successful contribution to like CentOS Stream Upstream now, and we're seeing people get commits in and things like that. And so I do want to point out, like back to this slide, I think we're getting community value creation, if you will. Like we're getting value creation as a community now. We're starting to build that up. It's not perfect, but it is working, and it is new. I think this is a new concept. I think we've been doing open source for a long time, and I think Red Hat is still learning, like, what is CentOS Stream exactly? Like it's kind of dictated by the rules of RHEL, but it also wants community contribution, and that makes like the edges are really hard and hard to deal with. And I would argue we're still learning what that means. All right, what I mostly want to dig into in the 15 minutes I have is the critical needs that I see. So like, I'll give you my life over the last 18 months. I've flown around the world, talked to customers all over the United States, all over Europe, all over the world, like on video conferences. I've probably talked to roughly, I call it 100 different customers. And so I see some things that crop up all the time. When you kind of talk to a customer, they're pretty good at automation nowadays. They're pretty good with Ansible or Chef or Puppet. They're pretty good. Sometimes they have their own homegrown stuff. They're pretty good at getting what they want. They have the thing they want, and they want to roll it out to production. And they're pretty good at that nowadays, generally, I'd say. There's some people that struggle with that, but mostly. Between containers and config management, I would say we're getting pretty good at getting things into production. But where I'm seeing the vast majority of brain power spent is planning, like planning and design. Like okay, if we upgrade from RHEL 8 to RHEL 9, or RHEL 7 to RHEL 9, or RHEL 7 to RHEL 10 eventually, you know, what do I need to do? Like, what do I need to do? Like, what will it break? How will it affect all these different things in my environment? And you start to realize that's an iceberg of like 20 hours of planning for every 1 hour of deployment, you know, and it's like a huge amount of work ahead of time. And I would say all of these kind of fall into that in my mind. I had to use AI because it's standard. It's a mandatory in the world. You have to mention the word AI all the time. All of us do. No, but I'll explain. I'm a little facetious about this, but I'm actually a little bit optimistic too. All right, so let's talk about the too fast, too slow problem. So I had this realization. I was talking to Brian Stinson, and I realized that like this is akin to like Solzhenitsyn's like concept of good and evil. And like all of you need to accept this, but we're all good and evil. Like there is no good guys and bad guys. I mean, unless you're American, then we know that like we have superhero movies, and we're very confident that we know who the good guys and bad guys are. But it's not real. So So it's in all of us, right? Like, if only it was so easy that we could just go destroy the bad guys and only the good guys would be left. I realize there's an analogy to this. There is the too fast and too slow. If only there were these slow organizations and we could just fix them, and then we get rid of them or we destroy them in some way, and then we'd have all the fast, cool organizations and it would be fine. This is bullshit, right? Like, it's impossible. Like, as soon as you get into a big enough company, there's going to be people that move fast and slow, and there's going to be people that move fast and slow on different days. And by this, I mean somebody will ask me for Python 3.11 and Python 3.7 for something else, and they want both. And they want them both supported for 10 years. So, because as soon as they put it into production, they're like, no, wait a minute. Now I don't want it to change. I did want it to change a lot. I was mad while I was developing it. Now I don't want it to change. This is a horrible problem. I mean, it's been around forever since I was young. But if only we could just find the good guys and bad guys in this, but it just doesn't exist. So this is what the fast and slow problem looks like at Red Hat today. So a colleague of mine built this, and I will demo it here. Let me drop out and demo this. So Brian Smith, a guy I work with, kind of built this thing in JavaScript. You can kind of see, like, if you look at these distros side by side, you can even kind of see a pattern with RHEL 7, but you can, I mean, you notice RHEL 7, these bars are like different lengths. They're kind of 6 months-ish, but like that one's probably like 9 months. That's probably like a year. That's probably 9 months. You know, and then you could kind of see this is every time we would do a dot release, and then this is when it goes to basically the last dot release, and then into what we call ELS. But you'll notice that RHEL 8 and RHEL 9 are actually very predictable. So for 2 major versions now, we're at a place where 6-month dot releases, the train leaves the train station. This is like public transit. It's just on time all the time, and we've been very successful. And then you'll see we overlap them, so that when you want to go from one to the other, you kind of have some overlap in time where, like, you know, if you want to keep making changes and you want updates and you want kind of the cool thing, you have about a 2-ish year window where you could jump to the next version and just keep going. But if you're slow, you can kind of hang out here and then move up to that one and hang out here, and you'll notice you can kind of hang out here and then upgrade to that one and hang out there. So you can kind of solve the fast and slow problem about as elegantly as I think it's possible to solve. I think it's a very hard problem. But this is, I would say, when you look at RHEL 8, RHEL 9, and you can imagine, hypothetically, in the fall of 2025, there will be another version of RHEL, and it will be the one after 9. But I'm not allowed to say what, no, it's RHEL 10 will be out, probably. So, and then I will make another chart like this. Well, Brian's tool will make another chart like this. And you'll kind of see we've made the fast version, if you kind of look up that, and then we kind of made the slow versions where you make jumps. So that's still a big thing that I'm talking to customers about all the time. So I would say the next one is the how do I know problem. Okay, so it's cool that Red Hat made it that way, but how many of you understood the life cycle? Like, truly understood the life cycle before this? I know you did. All right, good. Yeah, you did. Of course, I know too many of you. And you did. Yeah, I know you too. But the rest of them are like you might kind of have a gut feeling, but it's not, maybe it wasn't like super crisp. So the how do I know problem is another problem. So I kind of already mentioned this, but this is a synthesized customer that I sort of made up a quote to kind of describe what I've talked to like 100 customers. You know, their planning process is pretty, you know, they have a lot of smart people. Like, this is a fundamental flaw, I think, when people think that, like, oh, maybe these big banks, they don't know what they're doing. It's crazy talk. Like, they have 100,000 really smart people. They just have really complicated problems. Like, when you have a portfolio of like 50,000 engineers that are developing apps, and you have like 100,000 applications, I don't care how you slice it, that's a hard problem. Like, that's a hard problem for no matter how smart you are. And like I've said, a lot of them can get this out to production, but the planning part is the hard part. They spend, you know, upgrade 100,000 apps over a 10-year life cycle. How many is that per day? That's a ton of apps that you have to update per day. Upgrade, like go from RHEL 7 to 8 or 8 to 9 and figure out all the dependencies and figure out, oh, why did this SSL thing break when it was talking to this Cisco device but not this, and all these weird little bugs that you'll find whenever you upgrade software. You can imagine this is not at all like Solzhenitsyn. This is, so, for example, I'll demo again. So let me demo like something that's out right now. So like you look at, there's actually a talk in this room on Image Builder later today, so they will go deeper, I'm sure. But I just want to show you like a little baby demo of what Image Builder can do and something interesting. So let's like, this is a tool, by the way, if I didn't describe it, but this is a tool that Red Hat has at console.redhat.com that you can basically go in and build RHEL. You could build an image and kind of go next, 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 almost like an installer that you would do with Anaconda, but we can give you some guidance along the way that's a little bit different. So I'm showing you like automatic partitioning, blah, blah, blah. This would look pretty familiar to you. You could say, oh, let me install Podman, which is my old baby. I was a product manager for Podman for a long time, so I'm still sentimental. And then, oops, you know what I screwed up? Let me go back. I think I screwed it up. Yes, I did screw it up. It's here. So, all right, so wait. So a customer says, oh, wait a minute. Wait, I want to use RHEL 9. Okay, no problem. But I go, wait, I want to use RHEL 8. And the customer says to themselves, wait a minute. I'm going to describe this like in a very basic, like caveman way. There's a lot of dark blue stuff behind it. And we got this light blue stuff in front. That doesn't look good. Like, I like this one. It's got dark blue stuff behind it, so it's not the 1.0. Seems more mature than I thought. And it's got a lot of dark blue stuff in front of it and a lot of light blue stuff. Yes, that's the one I want. You cannot imagine how many customers I've talked to that say things like, they're like, we need you to support RHEL 7 longer. I'm like, why? This is a brand new application they're developing. They like started like a year ago. And I'm like, why didn't you start with RHEL 8 or 9? They're like, that's too new. And I'm like, well, it wasn't going to be too new when you finished developing the app a year and a half later. And so, like, if they would have seen this, they'd have been like, oh. Like, you can imagine, like, simplifying the life cycle is part of the problem. Showing it to them when they want to see it, when they need to see it, is a different thing. Today, you have to go look this up. You don't know this intrinsically. Like, there's a philosophical problem. So I show you this as imagine what other kinds of things we might be able to show them in Anaconda, perhaps in Podman Desktop when you're building a container, perhaps in Image Builder. You can imagine if we can show this kind of information to people ahead of time, it will solve a lot of that planning problem that takes 20 hours for every hour of deployment. So, all right, I have very few minutes left, but I don't have that much. I don't have any more demos. So the I need more problem. So since before the time of Sun Tzu, people have asked, why doesn't Red Hat support EPEL? Right? Here, let me ask a question. Does Red Hat support EPEL? Should you use EPEL? Yes. There you go. That is the crux of it, right? So, like, everyone needs to use it. So there's the I need more problem. It's been around forever. And this is a place where my brain and a lot of the product managers' brains are spending a lot of cycles. How can we do this? I can't announce anything yet, but I'll tell you we're thinking about it a lot. All right, the AI is a mission-critical workload one. This is an interesting one that I literally sort of added last minute because I had a couple internal conversations that gave me some epiphanies. Until this point, AI has been very sort of niche use cases. Like, we have a lot of big banks that are doing fraud analysis, things like that. That we have, there's been edge cases with machine learning with maybe like railway systems, things like that. There's been sort of these edge cases, but corporate America has not, in general, or corporate EU has not really cared like the Fortune 1000. I mean, they have little use cases, but it wasn't any significant population of their say they have 1,000 workloads, it would be like 1 or 2, not like 400 of them that use it. But I think we're on a crux where that could change. So this creates a problem that is interesting and new to me. It creates a problem and an opportunity, right? Like, if it becomes more mission critical and we see more of it, then commercial interests are going to drive it. And so then you ask, how does open source and open models and all of this stuff, how does that interaction happen? That's one thing. But then you ask yourself, is it an opportunity to make a better path there where and I mentioned it here for the inner loop development, what about hardware acceleration in dev? Because I probably need it for inference for certain types of workloads. If I'm an app developer, I'm not a model developer, I'm just an app developer. I just want a chat bot. I don't care how it works. I just want to use the model and I want it to respond quickly. So when I type things, it responds right. when it responds wrong, I want to say, hey, let me give it a new script, and then I want to hand it off to somebody else to go train, like, and fix it, right? And so, like, how can you think about that in dev into a training cluster, back to here, do some more fine tuning, back to here, into a gold environment, and then a prod environment. Like, it's actually like the hybrid cloud story, the marketing story that Red Hat's been telling for a long time, but it's the first workload in my mind that truly demands it. Like, there's probably no other way, because you're doing this all over the place, and there's no way you can do it all on your laptop. You can't all do it on a CI/CD system. It's going to have to go off to training clusters, et cetera, et cetera. There's going to be like this handoff for the app that is like beyond anything we've really seen. So I think there's some really interesting challenges to solve there. All right. So I have 5 minutes, but I want to save time for questions. So first off, pulling it all together, we're all still learning, right? Like, I wanted to show everyone here like how my brain is thinking about this, and a lot of the product managers, Bex is sitting here, like we think about this stuff deeply. We're like talking to customers, we're thinking about it. We are thinking about the upstream open source, how it works. We're not some kind of cabal in a secret room smoking cigars, like planning this stuff out. So we're all still learning, and I say try to be kind. I'm here. If you want to go and kick me and beat me up over anything you don't like in RHEL, I'm happy to take kicks. I'm pretty good at getting hurt. Also, I do think we have to think about open source. I think there's a whole long story that I can't get into with AIs and models and weights and whether the databases, actually you guys, Europe, you guys are doing some wacky stuff where you actually kind of want to protect the parameters and weights as a database. This is not something the US is looking at doing yet, but may follow you. Anyway, long story short there, way too much for this talk. But I do think there's some serious challenges. I think when you look at how people are changing licenses and not really looking at community collaborative value creation, there's a lot of single vendor, open source, et cetera, dual licensing. There's all these weird things. But the good news is it's exciting again, right? Like we're paying attention, and it's exciting. With that, I wanted to leave one shout out for a project that I sort of evaluated by reading to my daughter. If you're interested in teaching your kids about open source, this is awesome. It's a book. It's actually open source too. I did buy the version because I like to support commercial, but really cool. It explains it in a really cool way. I won't spoil it, but if you have kids and you want to teach them about open source, my daughter's 6. She's starting to understand. I just keep repeating it. All right, questions? I think we have 3 minutes, probably 1 or 2.
So if I was creating an instance on AWS, why should I use RHEL and not just use Amazon Linux or like a free OS? This
is a very good question. I think that's a solid question. I think the biggest reason why customers do is because you're seeing there was an argument like several years ago, like whatever, we're just going to go all in on Amazon. There were CIOs that were doing that. I think we're starting to see, like, I think it was Uber announced, they're like, it's like, like, I don't know which 2 cloud providers, but I think I do, but I don't want to mention because I'm not sure if it's public. But long story short, you're seeing this now happen where people are making announcements of using dual cloud providers. I think that's the number one reason. Like, when you really have an environment at scale, and you're like, oh, I want to run something on Oracle and Azure, or AWS and Oracle, or Azure, or GCP, you start to be like, I need some kind of like layer that works pretty well everywhere. I think that's number one. And I think it still does have all the traditional value props of like better security, better, if you look at how deeply we're thinking about a lot of the lower level problems, I think we are still spending more brain power minutes. If you look at a pie chart of brain power minutes, I think we're spending a lot of brain power minutes. But I think you have to get into it to kind of see it. I will admit, as a casual user, it's very hard to tell the difference. That's it. I solved it all. No questions. The whole thing. Did you guys think it was going to be more saucy than that? Like, did you? More spicy?
So the question from the chat, is there a clash between GPL v2 and Red Hat's Enterprise Agreement Appendix? You may not impose any further restrictions on the recipient's exercise of the rights granted herein.
I didn't quite understand the question.
Is there a clash between GPL version 2 and Red Hat's Enterprise Agreement Appendix?
I don't think so. Our lawyers don't think so. I think that's all I should say on that. Yeah.
Do you have any regrets on how the end of CentOS was handled? You said you wanted it to be more saucy, right? So.
You have to get me out for beer for that. I've been pretty public that like I've written blogs. I don't know if I wrote like a big blog that went viral when the first CentOS change happened, and I was pretty honest in that. And our executives saw it and actually complimented me for writing it. So like, I think we could have made the decision in a more crisp way, and at a better time, and probably communicated it a lot better. I'd say that's what I surmise. Those are the three main points that I made in sort of snarky-ish ways. I think, for example, in a perfect world, I would have made this announcement when we released RHEL 8. I actually argued we should. I would have rather do it on a boundary of a major release, and then I would have basically said, hey, everyone, like, comment on this. Here, we're going to announce that we're going to do this pre-RHEL 8. Let everyone get mad and be like, but this is what we still retain editorial control. Here's what we're going to do, you know. But it didn't happen that way because it is very complicated to make changes like that, and it is hard. and it wasn't some kind of conspiracy, I can promise you that.
No, I guess what you found it odd that CentOS 8 went end of life before CentOS 7.
Yeah,
After they had already put in the work to upgrade from one version to another, which you said earlier is a lot of work for people.
Yeah, and I can explain to you an interesting thing that was a blind side for us with that. We were talking to our customers, and they were like, no, we haven't upgraded yet. But when you talk to community users, it was a different animal. They were a different, if you think about user types, we weren't talking to them. They weren't customers, so we didn't know. We actually underestimated how much that would cause chaos, which is a data problem. Like, we talked to our customers, they're like, nah, we were looking at the usage data. There just wasn't that much upgrade yet. But we don't have usage data on CentOS, so we miscalculated. And that's why I say be kind. We don't know these things ahead of time until people start losing their minds. And now it's 911. They're calling the police and fire, and we're like, oh, Yeah.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah.